There are studies that show like a lot of anxiety is detrimental to your long-term health, but too little anxiety also shortens your lifespan.
We look at the traditional talk therapy model and it's just not working, not effectively, not efficiently, let's say. There are other tools in the way that like somatic work, and there's other tools in the way of, like for me, big things are breathwork and cold exposure.
Psychedelics have been really important for me in a lot of ways. I have just recently figured out I really need to forgive my father. And it was honestly easier to forgive my sexual abuser than him.
Well,
An absurd notion to me that psychiatrists are the only people that do not look at the organ in which they study. I really like the framing of life is your guru. And sort of if you have this sort of thing where you have this guru, they're fully like someone you trust, they're for you, they're very wise. If they gave you some hard shit to do, you'd probably be like, well, this is for me. Yeah, this is for me. I know this is going to be hard.
do you remember the moment where you felt like, fuck, I can't be this version of myself anymore, I just want to be someone different?
This is Willpower.
Hello. I want to share a little story with you. I went to the Heartland Gathering in 2025 and sat across a table from a man who's become a dear, dear friend of mine, and really was inspired by the way over yogurt and berries, we just really leaned right into like that last 5%, the most vulnerable parts of our heart and our lives. We've since had many meals together and done the same. And the question on the table is, what happens when two people who have rebuilt themselves from the inside out sit down after meeting in a way that they opened their hearts and were very honest with each other? What happens when we sit down and interview each other? Not just as experts in our field and the realms or hosts of podcasts, not as performers, but as humans who have walked through the fire and decided to tell the truth about it. So today's episode is different. I get a chance to sit down with Steve Sapourn. We are interviewing each other. Steve Sapourn is the host of Neuro's Journey, and I step into a mutual conversation about trauma, about nervous system repair, about parenthood, and really a lot about psychedelics and psychedelic therapy as tools, not shortcuts, but tools to be able to really shift our state and open the door for the biggest, most wildest dreams that we want to call in to come to fruition. We talk about what it really means to break generational patterns while we're still living inside of them. We talk about healing in public. I mean, Steve's story is just, he really had to step back and decide to layer a large amount of vulnerability into the world with his story and his background and the traumas he is unpacking as he's becoming the father that he is, the husband that he is. When we talk about healing in public, we talk about shame dissolving through honesty. We talk about the moment your survival identity starts to fall apart. And we explore how psychedelic therapy can be this catalyst. Again, not a cure, but a catalyst for reclaiming the parts of ourselves that were exiled long ago. This podcast isn't a highlight reel. It's not about brands. It's just two people sitting down, having a real conversation. Two people who are still doing the work, who are leaning in to inspire others, and our hope that this conversation helps support your journey into the most expanded version of yourself. Welcome to Willpower.
So we're here today. Kristin Weitzel and I are doing a little joint podcast. Willpower and the Neuro's Journey teaming up like
I
super
love
friends.
this. I know, like super friends. Exactly. We need like Wonder Twin powers in our brains.
And we kind of became super friends, right? Pretty quickly and recently.
Yeah. I would love to mention about how we met briefly at the Heartland Gathering.
Okay.
Over one of the first early breakfasts. And what I really noticed about you and want to honor in you is that you immediately, instantaneously, and some of your listeners may already know this, but really just like put your cards on the table. And I felt like you beginning to speak that way let me really speak that way, this like connection of vulnerability that we talked about at your event on Saturday, and the way that people can breathe and be in their own vulnerability in order to be able to elicit that from others. And that's how we get so much connection. And so it was like instantaneous for me. I think we had like tears in our yogurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I put on clear mascara today just in case we went there again, you know? So it's just been beautiful in a very fast time to sit and get to know you, and also like Steve, to hear your story and the way that you really transformed your life and the way that you really have broken a lot of generational trauma and challenges. And meeting your family this weekend was like really beautiful. So I'm excited for us to nerd out and ask each other questions about our lives and about the map forward for each of us.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I love that reflection. And, you know, it's an interesting thing as you get more vulnerable, you start to realize it does shift rooms. So I'll oftentimes, if I'm at like a psychedelic retreat or whatever, if people are asked to share, I'll kind of try to jump in first. And I've had that happen multiple times. So it's kind of a cool thing as you start to experience it. There might be a little fear around bringing some things forward, but I feel so much like, okay, if I put this out in front of somebody who's kind of rejecting it in some way and not taking it well, that's actually really good information for me, right? Do I really want to be in community with somebody who's like, here's about my sexual abuse and minimizing, yeah. So it's kind of a filtering thing too. I mean, you know, we talked about in the event a little bit of discernment too. I mean, you need to have that.
Yeah.
But you were a safe space and we hit it off really well. And since then, I've kind of researched you a little bit, and you did an episode at Psychedelic Science, right?
Yeah.
That seemed pretty vulnerable and real. So, like, what's the backstory behind that episode and what was happening then?
It's a great opening question, and one I would have never imagined you'd asked, which I love. So the real backstory on that is, and it's all like coming together as we sit in the space, I had really wanted to interview Bessel van der Kolk, whose book is right here on your shelf, and had gotten some connectivity with his team and was like at the conference as a media partner with the podcast. And they set me up to interview Bessel, which is a pretty big deal. He's been working in the space for, 50 years or something crazy and written this prolific book. And I was like nervous and excited. And I know he's a bit older and all that. And I had found very last minute chasing down videographers, and it's like the whole podcast thing, right? And MAPS is a massive venue, like it's held at a massive venue in Denver, and the convention center there is like, you can get lost in it. And literally his VA, or his assistant, and I were running around looking for him as the hour was like ticking away with my videographer and this and that, because there's so many talks and so many people are going to pull him aside and say, Bessel, I want to know what's up. And he was like sort of texting, but then also just kind of pulled completely out of the schedule. And so I was like, here I am, I'm at the conference. I have this videographer for like 90 minutes total. He's set up everything. I've paid him. Like, what I'm feeling right now about disappointment. This is like nothing about Bessel, right? He's going to do what he has to do. And I interviewed him later. He was apologetic, all of that, but he was very caught up. And so I was like, oh, I'm feeling feelings about, like, I have an abandonment trigger and I have, and I'm like, not going to play the victim on that. And I was like feeling my feelings in general. And so I thought, hey, this is an opportunity for me to just shoot something. And I didn't script any of that. So it's a solo-sode for anyone who's listening. It's a solo-sode that I talk about, a love letter to your nervous system. And I was noticing how my nervous system felt upregulated, but also a little sad that it didn't work out and disappointed. It was bringing up some stuff about my past breakup, like all of it in this container of just like, oh, there was like a scheduling issue, Right. And so it's like the story versus the rest of it. And I wanted to just like capture a bit of that, capture where I was and share some breath, and like how I was regulating myself. So I think a few of my avid listeners DM'd me and said, are you okay? Is everything all right? And because I get a little teary and, I talk a little bit about my breakup, but for me, it was just like an opportunity to be very forthcoming and in the moment. And I was like unsure if I'd ever even really release it. And I just released it. And it bounces a little all over the place, but it does follow a through line. And for me, it was just talking about the nervous system, the space, and how breath and I think heartache also have just like transformed my life.
So you had this thing where you might not release it. Was like, what was the moment like when you were going to release it? Were you like kind of worked up? Like, I'm actually pushing the button and this is happening?
I feel like I was like, if I'm going to preach this, I have to practice it. It's not perfect, but it's me. And so some listeners will love it. And some listeners will be like, I want the interview style. I want the factual information. Maybe they want less of like what I would say my heart. And that's okay. I just felt like this is the thing to do. And then just like I said, I don't get to push the button, but I called my podcast editor and was like, just push it, But I didn't feel nervous about it. I just felt like, fuck it, this is me. And just like you said, when you run into people, there's a filter. And if someone's going to be like, I don't want to listen to that episode, they don't have to. And if someone's like, she's too much, well, that's fine.
And was there a different response that you got to this episode than most of yours?
I just think some of my clients who listened to it and some of the avid listeners of the show were like, yeah, DM'd and asked. Some people said, thanks for sharing your heart. Some people said, are you okay?
Yeah.
You know, and I just took it all and I respond to all my own messages. So I just took it with the love with which it was sent to me. And I responded to them to be like, yeah, I'm doing okay. I think you and I both experienced, and like I would put this question to you too as well, you and I both experienced things in our lives where we're like the crushing dark night of the soul, whatever the catalyst is for it, right? Mine was like a big breakup, and it's certainly not around one man. It's around all the other things and the realization of my body, especially my somatic body, about how I felt about loss and grief and how connected that was to my father's death and all of these things. Mm-hmm. But I think we have this moment where we're doing us, we're doing the person we're our best version that we think we are. And then there's like a catalyst, or there's like it just doesn't serve us at some point. And you get to the moment that's like not even about, for me, the breakup, or for you, some of your childhood stuff. But like, do you remember the moment where you felt like, fuck, I can't be this version of myself anymore. I just want to be someone different. Like someone not wrong, or not you, but like someone, I want to be the next version. I have to stop the story, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I remember exactly that moment. Mm-hmm. You know, it was kind of a psychedelic experience, but not in medicine work. I was at a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert, and I'd actually done a big journey. I was going through a breakup, and I was really having a rough time with it. And, you know, I knew the rough time was not related. I mean, nice person and all that, but I was like, this is way overboard for what, you know, that relationship was. And I did, you know, like a 7-gram mushroom journey, which is a lot.
Yeah.
That was like, it kind of helped to reset my nervous system, but it was a little difficult, honestly, to get the messaging because I was just very, very high.
Yeah.
But it kind of helped me in some way. And then, you know, several months later, 3 or 4 months later, I just went to the Chili Peppers and I was designated driver. I was like, I'll take 0.4 grams of mushrooms. And I feel like I just got all the messaging from the thing months ago, like in a form that I could understand.
In a microdose, yeah.
And that I could be present with it. And I wasn't so high that it was a very emotional experience, but I just had this download that was, essentially, you've been operating your whole life like the world is scary and out to get you, and actually everything that happened to you was for you. It wasn't like against you. And if you can listen to this voice that you're hearing now, your life will get better. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was really this conversation back and forth with like, well, what is this voice? And the messaging I was getting was like, listen to the difference in this. Like, this is calm. Mm-hmm. I'm not begging you to do anything, you know, like it's not your loud, fearful, screaming voices. Mm-hmm. And since that day, anytime I felt I had like an inkling of something, because I'm the kind of dude who's like, I over-research shit, you know? You know? And so, you know, I could lose the magic of life. Like I could see, oh, you're doing a breathwork thing, and then I could read every comment on you online, and then eventually someone said something mean, and then I didn't do it. You know? That kind of thing. And I just stopped doing that. Anytime I had like, oh, that would be good for me. And I live in Boulder, there's a lot of good things. I just started doing it. And really that's when like my whole life shifted. It's been 3 years. I haven't had a drink since that day. I haven't, just in general, like my life started changing a lot then.
Yeah, and I think it would be great if you could just tap in a little bit to some of the stories that you've shared about your developmental years, the challenges and traumas you've faced. And I think it's important. This isn't about trauma dumping on anyone who's listening, but it is obviously to understand really the baseline where you were and how far you've come. And I think what's really notable and honorable is like, I didn't know you before. And also to see a man that is just like, I'm going to open my heart. I'm going to shift the way that I'm thinking and perceiving and the way that I talk to people, and going first is like such a beautiful opportunity for the listeners to kind of see the arc of the hero's journey here that's gone on. So if you could share a little bit about your background and the things that you've been overcoming, I think that'd be super helpful for people.
You know, I think what's interesting now is just the way that I frame my background, because you know, I was never like a woe is me kind of person, but I just was like, this is what I'm dealing with. now I look at it like I came into this life and this was my choice, and I chose this experience. And, you know, I've been to a lot of trauma doctors, and, you know,
Like you mean like your soul chose this experience
my
in the
soul
world?
chose it, you know, like I came here to, like, these are the things that I was overcoming, and that I was going to do something with them that is positive, that really honors the people that sacrificed for me, which is my mom and little version of me. So I look at it now as a blessing, but the story is kind of harsh. I mean, you know, the highlights, the
Lowlights, highlights, yeah.
the lowlights are, you know, when I was 4 years old, I went into to just visit my best friend in my neighborhood, and I found him floating dead in the swimming pool. In the process of fishing him out and, you know, alerting his parents and all that, obviously a pretty traumatic thing. And first time I ever spent the night at someone's house, I witnessed a mass murder just randomly. I was like in a car outside of 7-Eleven, and my sister was inside, and it was Vietnam era. A dude's running down in full gear, and he's just murdering people. And he pointed a gun right at my face and, like, looked in my eye and turned around and killed a mother, and I think paralyzed somebody else and killed someone else, and then he was shot and killed. You know, it was a different time, right? My parents' attitude were ethnic Greeks without college degrees and all that. Thank God nothing happened to you.
Yeah.
You know, kind of experience. And
then you just move on.
Yeah, you just move on. I mean, no one really ever talked to me about, you know, after, I mean, a little bit, and it's funny, when I started to do this project, I decided, I was like, maybe someone, you know, has, like, maybe there's a news article about it. And it was before there was a mass murder, like, every week in America. So it was big news. They called it the Wheaton Massacres, Wheaton, Maryland. Cover of the Washington Post, multiple stories. And when I researched it, there was an article, I mean, this is like 50 years ago. There was an article just 10 years ago. And it turns out, I'm sure the reason why I'm here is because I'm white. That was a racially motivated killing.
Oh, wow.
So he looked at me, and in the picture in the article, I remember him fucking perfectly 50 years later. It was like jarring. I was like,
I was going to say, did you have like a somatic response to seeing that?
Yeah, to seeing the picture, because I was just scrolling down, right? And I'm reading, and then his picture comes up.
And you hadn't seen anything in all these years?
No, I'd never. I mean, it never really, you know, like, it just started to become interested in it as like, oh, it's trauma, I'm working with it, that kind of thing. And so basically the article recently was about that someone was there and at another racially motivated shooting than when Dylan Roof shot up the church in Atlanta, and they were kind of talking about it. So then in my neighborhood, there's a man who began sexually abusing me and telling me that he was going to kill me if I spoke, and kill my parents if I didn't keep coming back. So that set me up as a stutterer for a long time and really disfluent. And, you know, finally just living in a house with a lot of domestic violence, you know, I had. And this is a sadness that I really am positive on, like, psychedelic medicines. Like, you know, I don't think my dad was a deep down bad person. But he did not act in a way that was very loving. And he never hurt me physically, but he hurt my mom a lot. And he didn't show love in the ways that you do.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of set me up in a certain kind of nervous system, and I became successful in business, which is one way to deal with that nervous system. And I also became a crack addict kind of simultaneously. So yeah, it's been this long journey of kind of figuring out that those things really impacted my life, and how to work with them, and how to move forward, and then how to do all that. And then it was like, oh, I figured something out, at least for me. Now I want to kind of offer it.
Yeah, and you are offering it to so many people. It's like, and the notion of, like, I think the thing that's really interesting for me is the notion of, like, really getting to your bones, the message that it's, like, not your fault. When we talk about nervous systems, I have, like, the hypervigilant thing from kind of the past experiences, and it's like every component of our parts and our nervous system has the superpower and has the shadow side, right? And so it's just interesting to feel our way through the dark initially around, it's not my fault. It's not my fault that it went down this way. Even if I called it in for myself, even if I victimized myself, that there's like a next step that you can get out of. And I even heard you speak about it with your dad a bit, which is like the hardest thing is when you feel like there is a perpetrator or a violator, especially when they're in your family. It's like, how do we look at everybody on the planet, even the people who are doing the worst of the worst things, and saying that was the best that they could do in that moment because of their upbringing, time, stories, psychosis, whatever, right? And like that's, I know, to me that just feels like where we try to soften edges and can be quite challenging, you know, for anyone who's listening to this, going through shit. It's hard to be like, you know, the person that drove you crazy is the person that you have to be like, when we're carrying around this hatred for people, it's just toxicity on us. We're just, you know, the chemical cascade in our body is just not harming them, actually. It's just harming us.
Yeah, it's 100%. I mean, you know, you brought up a lot of points there that, like, it's not your fault. I mean, I think we all remember that scene from Good Will Hunting.
Oh, yeah,
where Robin Williams is just saying it's not your fault and it's not your fault. And, like, that's something that's powerful, especially, like, sexual abuse. There's something, I don't know, you get this feeling that it is your fault. And, yeah, the nervous system... You know, it's just something now, you know, now that you figure that you have to learn about it, you know, and that's one of the things. I mean, it's an interest, all these processes are interesting, you know, that you have to be kind of curious about, like, okay, what's the physical stuff that I'm dealing with here? Like, how does this system work? I need to know enough about it to impact it.
Yeah.
And then also have the courage to do things that are uncomfortable, like sitting with the discomfort, your father's death, you know, all these things. Like, you gotta, you know, that takes courage. And then, you know, I know you're big on this, and you have to do shit every day.
Yeah.
Action.
Tools.
Yeah.
I'm like, how many, Mike, I need a bigger tool bag.
Yeah. And it's just figuring out it. And I do think there is a great reframing for me. Like, it's really happening in real time. I have just recently, like, figured out, like, I really need to forgive my father, you know, and it was honestly easier to forgive my sexual abuser than him.
Wow.
Because it was just like the sexual abuser was a predator in the neighborhood, right? This is my father, you know, and it really did. I mean, like, his lack of attention and love, like, created, like, a shame. You know, that is basically worded in you're a bad person and no one should love you. That sounds harsh and all that, but now that I know it, because I don't get as many direct words, I just get these feelings responses, and as my nervous system has calmed down, I'm getting more like nuance about what's happening with me. But, you know, now I look at it like, okay, we're all on this hero's journey. We're linked together via lineage, right? So instead of looking at my dad like a perpetrator or whatever, I look at it like, okay, well, he did bring me to a certain spot. My heritage is very poor. And I went to college, and he paid for a lot of lawyers for me and stuff. And he did a lot of the things his generation thought were the things to do for a kid. But now I kind of looked at it like, all right, I'm going to offer you some of the love and forgiveness that you couldn't offer me. Yeah. And look at it like I try to make him an ally, like, okay, what you've done and how that impacted me, or, you know, really has helped to create some of the parts of myself that I love the most. Yeah. Because I'm a very dedicated father. Not always the most skillful one, but, like, in my heart, I want to be there. I'm very different than my dad like that.
And I will also interject and say that I got a chance to meet your kids and Apollo at dinner, and I like the way that, first of all, he seemed specifically beyond his years, and the conversations that he had and the way that he spoke about you, it was like, because Michael, who, you know, is my partner in crime for Vessel, which we'll talk about later, but he and I had a conversation after just saying, how amazing is it that in one dinner table conversation, you can watch generational trauma be broken. Like, but that's because that's how you raise your kid, you know, and meeting your daughter, you know, briefly as it was, it's like, you're doing things so differently. So I think this is like the hopeful message to the listener is like, it can end with you.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is we start to look at it like we're all on our individual heroes' journeys, but like we're linking up, right? So now yours and mine are sort of connected. We're friends, we're helping each other out and that kind of thing. So I can look at it like, yes, my dad is part of it and I'm part of it, and Apollo's the next phase. And the nice thing about this stuff is it's unlimited levels, right? So it can always become more. And we can look at it like we're together, and releasing that, you know, you're right, the anger and the resentment You know, I think some of it, it's like we talk about courage a lot, but there is a courage to let go of that. Because that's really, in my experience, like what I really had to do was I was protecting myself from how much I was hurt.
Yeah.
And how sad I felt about it.
Yeah.
And so I had to really, I was like, if I'm going to forgive him, I really have to let in like what it actually felt like. And then I can forgive him.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's such a freeing thing. I mean, it's just like a lot of this experience, and I'm interested to know your take. It's just like so much wasted energy. Like, my nervous system was just fucking amped up for so long. I mean, I was wasting my life force, you know, on fears of things that weren't even there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like the story, you know, I have it, my friend Molly, she's like this really big sleep podcast, and we talk a lot about like we tell ourselves this story and then we hold on to it, like white knuckling it almost, right? Like it's, and then when other things start to happen that are maybe proving that story wrong or untrue, like this is my story I have, like my story for a very long time, and sometimes it sneaks in, is like I can't be successful alone. I sort of had to do a lot and be really independent as a kid, latchkey, all the stuff, divorce, you know, things. And it was like, I'm alone. I'm just going to do this all alone. But there was something in the back of my mind that was triggered, being like, you're only going to get so far when you're alone. Like you need, because you don't have a life partner, a business partner, whatever, you're never going to get to the place that makes you feel joy. And so that story like can proliferate. And every so often when things are going well, I'm like looking for the hit of that story, because that's what my nervous system is aligned with. And I think this is like one of the most important things for people to really sit with themselves on, is calling themselves. I hate to say calling out. I say calling in. I want to call when I work with clients, I'm like, I want to call you in on this, to just be a mirror and say, this feels like it's your, like in Landmark, they would call it like your act or like your story. And like how we separate ourselves from that enough to say, hey, what happens? And when I'm working in the medicine space, I will ask a client when they say something, I'm stupid or whatever. It's like, what happens if the opposite of that was true? Like nobody loves me, or they all left me behind. And that's, you know, feels very victim, but I'll say, what if the opposite of that was true? Could we like ruminate on that for a moment, you know? And so like, I think there's a navigation in there of like the story and trying to break free of it. And then once you break free of it a bit, then you're like, well, actually, who am I? And what is the story? And that can feel daunting to fill in the blanks, because where do we do that from? You know?
That's reminiscent of Byron Katie's kind of the turnaround. Like, well, what if that, is it 100% true? Well, you know, of course, maybe not. Like that kind of thing. And I think just going through the exercise of doing that, like, is just really good for a person, because you're starting to see that your story. And I do think there is, like you're talking about, like getting attached to the story. I really like the framing of life is your guru. And sort of if you have this sort of thing where you have this guru, they're fully like someone you trust, they're for you, they're very wise. If they gave you some hard shit to do, you'd probably be like, well, this is for me. Yeah, this is for me. I know this is going to be hard. Well, just look at life like that. And that's really what that moment in the Chili Peppers was for me. It was like this realization, like there's something all about this that was for you, and what is that? So instead of orienting around maybe how difficult the things were, like, well, what are the blessings that are possible from this? Yeah. And you might not be experiencing them in this moment, but you could also think about it like well,
what's coming.
Yeah, like I could switch this up, or I could do this, or I could use this in some way, or it made me resilient, or, you know, I worked really hard and I was kind of overworking, but I did make a lot of money, you know, like, I mean, there are things and you can kind of work with it. But, so like you talk a lot about the nervous system, right? And like the regulation of it. And I know you have a lot of practices. Like, what are your go-to practices for like regulating a nervous system that is dysregulated?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like, these are some of my baseline tools. There's different breathwork protocols on the SherpaBreathinCold.com website, shameless plug. There's a couple pieces of audio, guided audio. So I always welcome people to go to that section on the website that says listen, and then you can download some things. Just if you're like new to breathwork, or somebody wants to get guidance and not have to, it's sort of nice to like unplug and just follow what someone else says, you know? I don't ever do my own guided audio. It's sort of weirdly meta. I'm all critiquing myself. But I love to like throw on like the Othership app or something to just get some breath work. I do breath work quite often on my own. The first thing I will give people to do if they're feeling highly dysregulated is like a a somatic exercise that's called orienting, like not my exercise, it's pretty well known, which is like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So just so for people who are listening, orienting is a really great thing to have in your pocket because no one knows you're doing it. So you can do it on a Zoom call, you can do it, you know, in the subway, in your car, like wherever you are, you can do it and no one necessarily knows. And I call it like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? That's what you remember to do it. And first you say, okay, I'm going to look around and notice 5 things and really notice them. Like there's a green plant, you're wearing blue pants, like notice the color, notice kind of the shape, and pick 5 things in the room, notice them. And then you're like, okay, 4 things that I can hear. What are 4 things that I can hear? And it kind of forces you to tap in. I did it this morning, actually, before I came over here. And I was like getting to specific different, you know, what's the furthest sound I can actually hear? Because sometimes it's just the noise is the cacophony is the one sound, but there's actually many sounds.
Right.
So 4 sounds, 3 things that you can touch, you know, and feel. So it's like your jeans, your skin, whatever, you know, the table, whatever it might be. So you're having a sensation there. 2 things that you can smell, which really kind of makes you tap in a little bit more.
Yeah.
And all of this is about presencing. And then the last thing is 1 thing that you can taste. We usually only have like 1 taste in our mouth, I think. But it's like right now I'm like, oh, there's like a little butterscotch in the tea that I'm drinking that Leah gave me, which is so lovely. But what it does is it presences us completely. And it's reminding the nervous system that it's safe. And I took 3 times as long as it actually would take if I wasn't talking someone through it. It'd take you like less than 30 seconds to do that probably, right? Unless you had a little more time.
Right.
So orienting can be a beautiful way to just pause and stop and connect with yourself and your body, to just like notice your surroundings, because it is telling your nervous system as you check in and look around the landscape, all of that, you're like widening your gaze, which we know when we're being chased by a lion or whatever the stressor is, we start to get more tunnel vision. So you're like reminding your body by opening your gaze and looking at things and sensing yourself that you're safe. And that's like what this whole game is about, right? It's like interpersonal relations. You and I sitting in this space right now, we know we're safe with each other, so we can speak freely and like tap more into, I guess like you'd say, universal peace, which is in some way like the goal for me is like, how do I just sit in a space where I'm like, oh, that's peace. I'm regulated and I'm feeling open.
You know, and I think that's a really good exercise. I mean, obviously all those things are just making you present in the present moment. And, you know, when you don't know anything about trauma, which I didn't know anything about it until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you know, you have this amped up nervous system and you just think of it as, okay, well, this is the experience that I have. But over time you start to realize, well, this is kind of almost fear of fear.
Yeah.
You know, it's like things that are not happening now. So like, I think every time that you do that and you present yourself in that moment and you see the disconnect between my somatic experience and the reality of what's happening, it might not always shift that thing, but you start to train your brain like, oh, okay, like I'm actually safe. There's nothing scary here.
Yeah.
I'm present.
And you just bring it into your awareness. Like I had
Yeah.
a thing racing to the airport on the trip here where I was like, dropped my passport, fell like under the little check-in machine in the kiosk. And I knew I just had put it down on the top of my jacket. And I was like escalating and escalating and escalating. And this is like the point of me saying this as well is like, I'm a nervous system coach. Nobody's getting away with never having an upregulated nervous system. This is like, you know, I think as a hypervigilant person in my past, and even sometimes that comes up again because it's an easy place for me to go. People will be like, calm down, just calm down, take a breath.
Yeah,
and sometimes I'm like, listen, it's not, I mean, it's take a breath. It's almost like, okay, that's almost more annoying to tell me because the goal of the game isn't calm all the time. The goal of the game is regulated, right? How can we be the most regulated person in the room? And I'm at the airport kiosk and I'm like, can't see the passport. And I'm walking up to the front desk to check in my bag and I'm feeling escalated. And I'm even more embarrassed because I'm feeling shame, not embarrassed, but even though Michael's like my best friend, I'm feeling shame that he's witnessing me in this space because I'm getting like a little tunnel vision and a little ditzy. And I'm like, I can't find my things. And a woman from the airlines picks up my passport off the floor and says, did someone just lose their passport? And I'm like, yes, like almost not agitated, but I'm like desperate for the passport. And like, I have, because this is what I do for a living, I'm like meta floating above myself being like, come on, this is not regulated. You're telling people to be the most regulated person in the room. What's going on with you? And so I dropped my bag off and everything. And then I had to turn to Michael and say, hey, I need 30 seconds to a minute before we go anywhere else. I need to downregulate myself. So that's the part that I'm proud of, right? Is like, is like saying that to my friend and being and him knowing like, cool. He actually is like, I have a whole story that he's like judging me, being like, she sucks to travel with. None of that's true. He's just like standing there noticing that I'm a bit upregulated. And he's like, cool, let's just take a minute and breathe. And you can get your bag back together and then we'll just go to the gate. And it's like,
and
that's
I
it.
think it calms people down. Like people get calmer to know that the other person knows what's happening.
100%.
Like, okay, like this is happening. And to your point, it would be a disaster if our nervous systems never got upregulated, like, because honestly, I think I don't think I know there are studies that show like a lot of anxiety is detrimental to your long-term health, but too little anxiety also shortens your lifespan.
Yeah, and then
so you need a little bit. And so it's really what you want is your system to elevate and come back down.
Yeah, as quickly as possible. Yeah.
And and I think the techniques that we both use all the time are sort of, I would imagine your nervous system oftentimes just does that. And then I'm not like practicing breath work. It's just, I got up, I got down. Yeah. When it's a little stickier, and I'm like, I have to bring awareness to that and breathe a little bit and do those kinds of things. So
yeah, we breathed a little before we started. I breathed before I left the house. I made sure I was like grounded and present for you and hoping that I can hold that. And then we're not both fully downregulated right now. We have lights, we have camera, we have action. And this is like also be upregulated, like chase your kids around the park and go to the gym and lift heavy weight and be in a super upregulated state because that's functional and actually like a positive stress that's building more resilience. Yeah. And then as soon as you're done, come back down to a place of like peace and comfort and social and being able to be connected to people. And that's a game.
Yeah, and I think, there's no the goal is for somebody to understand their nervous system enough to work with it in a way that benefits them most.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it might be different from you to me, depending on what our goals are, but just, understanding it a little bit, understanding that there are tools. And I just think over time, you start to create this disconnect between what you're experiencing somatically and what is actually happening. And your brain over time figures that out and you just have less of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do think it is important for people to understand the system in which they're dealing with. And
become a wizard of your own nervous system. And then you can even share with people this is a place that I get stuck. So I'm advancing the knowledge to you that when we go to do X, I'm going to visit a friend at the hospital, but I had this challenge at the hospital with my dad when he was sick all the time. So when we go, I might feel a little tense or, dysregulated, and it's not anything to do with you. And then you've just cleared the playing field for both yourself and then the person you're with to let them know what's going on in your system, right? And that to me is that's the gold star moment.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And it also brings you more confident. To me, confidence isn't knowing my nervous system will never get out of whack because I mean, it was fucking out of whack a lot the past couple of weeks in dealing with this thing. The confidence is more like, I can identify it. I know tools that work, right? And I know what to do. So,
should we talk about a few tools that you and I have used? Because there's all over them. I think we've used a lot of tools in our journey of trying to figure out how the body works. Do you have some tools that you're like, here's some things I liked and here's some things I didn't like? I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, so there's been, if we're talking about tools, you're talking about in the moment of regulating your nervous system or just generally?
I think what I'd love to hear from you are a few things, a smattering of things that you tried as you were going through and breaking through some of the trauma and then also re-regulating your nervous system. If someone's listening to this and they're feeling like they're going through some anxiety, grief, loneliness, if they feel like they're working on processing trauma or things that they can't quite get to the surface, are there different varied tools that you use that you loved or hated?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of different things. The one that jumps to my mind when you say this and what would be something I would definitely recommend for somebody who's hesitant to get into their shadow work, right? And especially, I mean, I've noticed it with people with sexual abuse. It's scary, right? And what was really transformational for me was actually doing neurofeedback and scanning my own brain.
Yeah.
And it's an absurd notion to me that psychiatrists are the only people that do not look at the organ in which they study. I mean, they're basically just prescribing you medicines. Most SSRIs are prescribed in a 10-minute visit with a primary care doctor that doesn't have any real expertise in that. And they're just trying things out on you. Whereas when I tore my knee up, I got an image. They're like, this is what we're going for. This is what we're working on. And so I did a brain scan of my QEEG brain scan, which is less than $500. I saw the brainwave patterns. What was amazing was the doctor who was doing it, you know, he hadn't known about my history. And he just looked at it and he was like, yeah, I bet you're anxious. I bet, you know, you have trouble sleep. I mean, he can nail like a lot of my difficult things in my personality. He's like, well, look at your brain. You know, you see these red spots? That means overactive. That's all your amygdala and your fear center. See these light blue spots? That means underactive. That's my prefrontal cortex, which is, you know, it makes meaning out of that. And then over time with that experience, every 10 sessions you do another map. So it's really cool for me as a data, I was a hedge fund manager for a long time, I operated with data a lot, was I could start to feel my progress. And then by seeing it actually change on the scan, it just made it more real to me. It made it from like, yeah, I think I think I was cooler with Apollo or Athena, you know, to, oh, well, look at the change your brain has made. And, oh, I was definitely cooler with Apollo, you know.
Yeah, it helps you with your belief systems in some way, right? Because it's like factual, not to say the placebo effect would or wouldn't work in that case, but just seeing the tangible data, because I did a QEEG as well, and 18 scans. There's a Well Power podcast episode where he's reading my scans, so everyone could see how like he's like, your brain is like a sports car, and then I had a moment you can like feel it where I'm like, thanks, and he's like, it's a shame you're driving with the e-brake on, and I was like, yeah, and so like, and he called my tinnitus out before. Like
really?
I had, because I was like, I'm a biohacker, and I was like not sharing with anyone except like probably my sister that I had tinnitus and it was getting worse. And I was telling no one because I felt like bad biohacker. Is that something they can
work with in neurofeedback?
They have like a 50%, I mean, tinnitus is kind of like a moving target because it can be caused by a lot of different things.
The hairs in your ear and
I mean, lots of things. Yeah. TMJ, like, you know, it could be, mine started to kick in a bit post-COVID, even though it wasn't vaxxed or whatever. So I don't know. You know, perimenopausal years, like there's so many things that can come up for women specifically as well with tinnitus. You can get racked in the head and, you know, there's a lot of different things. So they would say there's about a 50% success rate to clear tinnitus through neurofeedback. And you need a certain number of sessions.
That's actually a great success rate.
It's a great stat.
Very difficult like condition to live with.
Yeah, and I did the scan and I only did 18 sessions, which is a bit of a bad biohacker moment, and really just meeting the company the other night and then seeing your brain scan on the screen and everything, I was like, oh, I need to go back and do the sessions like the rest, because you need at least 40 to kind of get there, right? Like 30 or 40 sessions to start. You see change, but like they recommend you do 40 or so.
Yeah, I mean, with my people, they were more like, let's just look at it after every 10. But, you know, I wanted it to be better.
They're here in Boulder, right? They're here in Boulder.
Yeah, they're in Arvada, but they're near here. And yeah, I actually met Tristan, who is an owner of that company, at a meditation retreat. Cool. And I was
Tell me what they're called again.
Neurogrove.
Yeah. They were lovely guys, so I met them.
Yeah, and highly recommend their whole practice. They've been really great for my family. And you know what's interesting is, so I've done 40 sessions and 4 scans now, and I'm pretty, my brain, and it's funny because the last scan was like just a few days ago, so the first time I saw it was on the screen at my party. I was like, damn, that looks pretty good. But we also did QEEG scan with Leah before she did Ibogaine. And then we did it right after she came back. And then she's doing her session of neurofeedback with Neurogrove. And when she's done the 10 sessions, we'll rescan her brain and show the change and do a podcast on it. But what was interesting is Ibogaine changed her brain as much as 40 sessions of neurofeedback in one time. I mean, and Tristan was... He said, these are profound changes in the brain. And then we're using them to then keep those changes locked in with the neurofeedback. Yeah. So I love that. I mean, other things that have been good. I mean, obviously psychedelics have been really important for me in a lot of ways. somatic experiencing stuff, just really like, I don't know if you have the nervous system that I had, it was like concentrated in this area in my stomach, and it would get so intense. You know, that's why I was an addict. I mean, essentially it would just build and build and build through the day, and I'd tell myself all the time in the afternoon I wasn't going to drink or do this or that. And by 9 o'clock, I'm just like, fuck it, you know, what's the dude's number? Kind of thing. And, you know, what I started to learn with somatic experience is even in the midst of that happening, if I start to try to find other places in my body that are calm. So like I was never dysregulated in my thighs or my feet or whatever. And it just, you know, so I'd put my attention on the difficult spot, put it on an easy spot, move it back and forth, and start to tell my body like, okay, yeah, like, you know, but really if I analyze this whole thing, it's probably only like 5% of my body that's really revolting against me now, but I'm putting 95% of my attention there. And so how can I start? And I think some of this is just starting to train your system of what reality is. So you get so zeroed in on this spot, you've been focusing on it your whole life, that's your whole world. But really, it's about 5% of your world.
You know? And somatic practices are incredible. Like, they've really helped me a lot. I even worked with a somatic practitioner for probably 10 sessions when the breakup first happened for me, because I was just not in my body, or just, there was just so much anxiety that I was like uneasy, uneven, unstable in some way. Just physically, I felt like very, like I need a support practitioner, and I'm very lucky to have so many of those friends in my world. And I worked with a guy named Will Reason, who runs like a trauma and somatics course that I went on to certify with him, so I could get more and more of an understanding of that somatic work can be so beautiful, because there's no slight, it's going to sound like a slight in some ways maybe, but like we look at the traditional talk therapy model and it's just not working, not effectively, not efficiently, let's say. And I get that many, many people are going to talk therapists, but I would like to share and say that like if you're listening to this and you're doing this, there are other tools in the way that like somatic work, and there's other tools in the way of, like for me, big things are breathwork and cold exposure, right? Like the emotionality. Like yesterday I went down to Eben G. Fine Park and threw myself in the cold river. It was so beautiful.
Did you do sauna at Ember and Ice?
I didn't. No, I didn't get a chance to do it. They closed at 9 o'clock, so the one night we were going to go, we just didn't kind of get it all together.
That's a good spot. I just did some breath work and cold plunging.
They do great
Eben
work.
G. Fine. It's really cool.
Yeah, and so Eben G. Fine is just like fun, and I get a little shivery, and the mood boost is just always palpable. It just, I think I push cold and breath, of course. Like breath work that's my big area of expertise, in teaching this cold and breath coaching course that I lead. It's like, it's the number one thing. We can talk all day long about how cold serves the physiology, the body, longevity, brown adipose tissue creation, everything. That's all great. And there's so much beautiful research. It's widespread, but like, it's kind of all over the map, but there's so much beautiful science about what it's doing at a cellular level. But for me, the saving grace of cold exposure is mental emotional. Like it just, you have a cascade of neurochemistry after you take a cold plunge, you have a parasympathetic rebound, you can tap. It's really hard, as you know, to be anywhere else but in the cold water. You're so hyper present. You're like, this is presence. This is the moment that I can tell myself. Like yesterday I got into the water, and I always do a little thing where I ask myself, how are you feeling right now? What are you saying to yourself in the mirror right now? Where might you be incorrect with things that you're thinking or feeling or doing? Are there things you have to let go? And there's things that you need to be focusing more on and speaking your truth around. And I just run through these in my head, like just because it's a space where I'm so present that I can tell myself the truth in that moment. And then when I get out, I always feel better. And in my highest moments of anxiety, listen, there was sometimes I needed to take a hot bath, okay? Like you got to choose your weapon, you know, when it's the right thing to be able to help. But most of the time, it's like cold water was the savior, you know, getting into it so that I could get that neurochemical cascade to just be out of bed and be functioning in my day. There are physical somatic tools like that to get people to tap into. And it's, again, like I had to go to some talk therapy and relational therapy because I needed another human that wasn't me. You know, my friends were the gifts to me. My community were gifts to me for well over a year while I was navigating this, because they just kept showing up and listening to the same story. You know, but at some point you pay a professional to be like, let me just give my friends a breather. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, the somatic tools, the other tools, I'm sure, you know, both of us have had a profound experiences with psychedelics as well. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, and you know, to that point on talk therapy, I mean, I agree with you. I think, my view of it, it was very valuable when I was like in my 20s and, or like to learn the lay of the land. But I just think it gets belabored. It's sort of more like, this is the area in which you're operating. Now go and figure out how to operate in it. I don't see it. It never changed behavior for me. It just gave me awareness of why I was doing the fucked up shit I was doing.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so, you talk about the cold water. And so there is a lot of like, what are the main things that are going on in the brain with cold exposure? Dopamine,
dopamine, norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are the same as adrenaline and noradrenaline. It just two different factions name the same thing, two different words. Just like, thanks, science community. It's already confusing enough. The dopamine hit. There's a big. There was like an Instagram meme rush at some point about like, the dopamine hit from cold exposure is 300% over the hit from cocaine, or whatever the stat was that people put out there. There's a beautiful bliss chemical cascade in the body that actually just potentiates you to feel better. Like and then when you get out, right, this is like not, if you put the dots together, you can understand this. Your body is in the water and it's in an upregulated state and it's going to be in fight or flight. And the way I teach people to breathe through that specific, let's call it panic or that upregulated state, to really settle in and be okay. Like, can you be with what is, right? This is like the words of Peter Crone. He always talks about, can you be with what is right now? Can you be surrendered in the cold water and say, okay, this is cold water. It's not comfortable, but can I be with it? And in what way can I? And teaching ourselves to do that, like none of us, in my opinion, which, has some clout now, none of us are getting into cold water to be like, I'm going to be the best cold water, like longest, coldest, like, badass athlete in the world, like maybe a few bros, but mostly we're getting in cold water to get better at life. That's what I want for people, is like, I want people to be able to prepare their breath, their nervous system to get in cold, to regulate through it best they can, even though they're going to be slightly upregulated. And then when they get out, your body's like, we survived. And it sends this whole other parasympathetic rebound. I've had like corporate executives that are stoic, like come out of the cold exposure, be singing Broadway show tunes on my rooftop. Like it just gives, I think it's such an honor to walk people through cold as well, because you get to kind of see their like 10 or 11-year-old selves come out and their playful side. And that's all your parasympathetic rebound. That's all your nervous system being like, we survived, let's celebrate, by like inducing this whole cascade of beautiful, light, joyful emotions. And it's undeniable. We can do as much research and we can quote all the things we want, but we know that that's happening in the body post-cold. So why wouldn't we attempt to use it? And I know that for people it's scary or hard, or cold shower is hard enough, or I'm going to put myself in cold water for how long and what temperature. I get all that, but it really shifts your entire physiology towards the greater good for your highest self. So like that's the game, because I know we all love Wim Hof. I mean, you know who he is. We all know who he is. You can breathe yourself the way that Wim Hof is known for, right? This like upregulating your superventilated breaths, breathing heavy before you get in, because you're basically setting your nervous system up to prepare for the challenge that the cold is. But when you and I, knock on wood, we don't get any of these phone calls anymore, but like when you and I get the call that we've like lost the job, or there's an accident, or there's some bad thing, or we don't know that call is coming. So we don't have 3 minutes before to like breathe,
right.
prepare, whatever. It's like, we need to be getting good at the game of life. So how do I like regulate myself, get in deliberately, because that's the only way we can practice, re-regulate myself, and then get out, so that can mirror what happens when, something tragic happens or some bad news comes through the door, so we can actually functionally be with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So it's, I think I perceived it to be the colder, the better. But recently, I can't remember the man's name, but I read a study where they said actually the peak of the positive chemical changes comes between just like 50 degrees. It's not like a super cold.
Yeah, you can get benefit at a lot of different temperatures. I would say nothing over 55 degrees, you sort of like lose the mojo. And then, again, the research is kind of all over the place, but if you look at it, there's a case to be made that your cold shock proteins fold better starting around that 40-degree mark Fahrenheit. So I try to push that number because that's like a longevity marker, right? So like the better your shock proteins fold, there's heat shock proteins in the sauna that get activated, but the better they fold, the better cells can communicate.
Okay.
So I'm like, if I'm going to get into 50, I might as well work and adapt down to 40 because, and also like I'll do as cold. It's like yesterday, the water's probably 38 degrees and I'm just get in. I don't even have a response to it anymore. Like I know that it's happening, but I don't have a gasp reflex. I don't have, because you just attenuate to it. You just adapt. So I always say to people, and especially women who are wanting to start warmer. Start with a cold shower. There's no race. Like there's no race to be like, I'm 22 minutes and 38 degrees and I'm more badass than anyone else. So it's like, you'll get benefits at any temp. I'd say 50 and sub 50, but like start at 55 if you want. And you're going to definitely get some benefits there when it comes to, just like a lighter mood and a little bit better sleep. But I'm a biohacker. I'm like, what's the temperature that's going to be optimal for me to get everything?
Right. And that's 40.
I think it's like for around 40. And anyone who's in generally good health, I would think, I'm starting to feel more and more like after the 12 noon mark, just to manage hormones, to manage like what happens with people's cortisol in the morning and stuff. But anyone who's in generally good health can get into or adapt towards 2 minutes in 40-degree Fahrenheit water. Doesn't have to be your first go round, right? But you can get there.
And then if you're doing 2 minutes in 40-degree water like regularly and you can do that, are you still getting the benefit, or does your body adapt to that and you now need to do 4 minutes to get 2 minutes worth of benefit?
It's a great question. And the simplest answer I can give is like the optimal thing is you want to be able to get in the water, get out of the water, have a minute or so, which is usually when I'm trying to get off the bathing suit and get dressed. Like yesterday, I was trying to not be naked in the middle of Evan G. Fine Park. I'm like, oh, but it's like, get your wet bathing suit off or whatever, but the shiver response will kick in a couple minutes. So you want a light shiver response that lasts and you can feel it, but isn't going to be like lasting an hour, right? Because that's a lot. So it's like where you get your shiver response, the shiver is actually the signal to tell your cells, oh, we need to adapt, because it's helping warm you up. It's microcontractions of the muscles, and all of that happening is letting your overall body structure know we need to adapt to get better at this next time. Maybe it makes more brown adipose tissue and it helps you adjust. So the short answer is you want to figure out what your thing is that you're going to get a little shiver afterwards. And a lot of people have been talking about contrast therapy, and a doctor just came out and said, oh, contrast therapy isn't doing anything. I mean, it's in some ways laughable because it's always doing something for your mental, emotional, depression, anxiety, mood. Like that's what you and I are here for, right? We want people to be able to heal themselves and to save their own life if they're in a jeopardized position. But contrast therapy, my big recommendation is sauna, great. Take 2, 3, 4, I tell people 5 minutes before you get in the cold. So you can have that sweat response and your body, your thermoregulation can work, your body can work it and it can begin to adapt. You get into the cold and then you get out of the cold, let the shiver response happen 3 to 5 minutes before you get into heat. Because otherwise we're letting the device do the thing instead of our body.
No, that makes total sense.
So it's like a nice way to kind of think about it to optimize.
And I think, we were talking about the hero's journey and courage. And I just think this is your body like telling you it's rewarding you courage, and that's a muscle that you can build. So doing it with cold and realizing that, oh, I can be fearful of something and I can have a little anxiety about it, but it's also not going to kill me. And actually, after I make the leap or the plunge or whatever, I feel better.
Yeah.
And so both things, you wouldn't want to be, you can be in saunas a little longer, but you wouldn't want to be in a hot 180-degree sauna forever, right? Eventually it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you get that incredible feeling, and it's like all these things are building you towards I just think courage and love are the things that are important in life.
Yeah, and I agree. Well, there's a Breathwork song that the woman's speaking on the undertones. I don't know who the artist is, unfortunately, to mention, but and she says, notice that fear is just courage working to take form. And I feel like that just hit me so powerfully when I heard it the first time. Like to try to take that nervous-sided, fearful, emotional, and say, okay, this is the work through. This is not, what if the steps along the way are not in the way, but they're part of the way, So it's how do we kind of think about that? Because there's an energetic frequency of fear in our body. We can feel that, right? So how can we make that how can we remind ourselves that that's just courage trying to organize,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, it's interesting, that what that brings up. We were talking in our pre-interview call, and you said something like, the medicine journey is like you could step over the threshold, but you're not definitely doing it unless you actually integrate and do the work, right?
Yeah.
And what I really think is like we should look at our life like we are at those thresholds every day. Right? It doesn't have to be a medicine work kind of thing, but it's like the nature of life and how we expand is to like push ourselves a little bit. And so, with medicine work specifically, I know you're big on integration and that whole process. And, also just got the opportunity to take Vessel and support me on an MDMA journey that I did after my podcast launch part or as part of the party.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would be so mopey right now. I mean, I pretty much quit doing it because of how I felt. Like I'm willing to spend the time that I'm, partying or whatever I'm doing or medicine on that. But like multiple days later, losing a whole day,
Yeah.
it just started to become like, I'm not going to do that anymore. And honestly, I feel great.
Yeah.
I don't feel like normally I would be in this mode of, man, I can basically only watch rom-coms today.
Yeah. Get me a box of tissues.
Yeah. Kind of vibe. So why don't you talk about like the integration and how you incorporate Vessel into it and how you can just, explain the best way as a practitioner to maximize these experiences.
Yeah. Amazing. And the backstory a bit for this is, I think it's important for the listeners to know, is that you and I have had extensive experience using psychedelics in a very, I don't want to say, in a therapeutic environment, so that we can give that fear center, our amygdala, a pause enough to be able to examine what's there and to be able to see who we are and to feel into the people that we want to be, and process some of our trauma, right? And so I work specifically with MDMA and psilocybin with people one-on-one and couples. I work with them in a very respectful and discreet and closed container where we're literally therapeutically mostly having conversation during the course of those sessions. I call them the inner quest. And so I know that you've used those medicines. We've used them together now. People are using other substances, especially mushrooms right now is such a popular thing to be able to get to the place. And I think it's beautiful for people to do some of these solo journeys, but also what I could tend to see is like, if we don't have a guide with us, there isn't someone to really kind of capture the full stint of what's happening in the body and what memories are coming up and notes. And like anyone who's listening to this has done some kind of either MDMA or psychedelics or mushrooms or, even if it's Ibogaine, like it's like how can somebody capture, and they're all going to be different. Ayahuasca and Ibogaine, you're going to be a bit more like eye mask. But I think there's this like portal that happens like the 24 hours after even, where it's like one of my first big intentional experiences, I was on a podcast the next day and I just spoke to everything that came up in the journey, it was a group of us. So it was guided, but not like one-on-one. And I listened back to that podcast a month or two later and went, thank goodness I recorded with this person, because that's where I sort of came out of the closet on using psychedelics and all of this for healing. And I was like, I talked about the journey, and a month later was like, if I didn't listen to this, I wouldn't have remembered, because the portal was so open so I could speak to it. So it's like getting and having someone who's a guide, like a trusted person with you there, who's well trained enough to take some notes. I do notes and summaries and parse information, and we break down the parts like internal family system style, and I give people very customized homework, and so I want to just emphasize that as we lean into the integration piece, which is how are you setting yourself up for success? And it certainly doesn't mean someone can't do a solo journey that's very internal. They can. But like, then how can you be your own guide in that way, where you're journaling and you're writing things down and you're making space that the next day you're not like, or even that night, you're not like going out to party with your friends or something after you've done a solo journey, that you're feeling into what's coming out, because those are the important messages.
Yeah.
And so for me, this is like when I'm working with someone, it's a 6 to 8 week container. And yes, there's one peak experience in the midst of it, but that 8 week container to me is that's where all the mojo is. It's like understanding their medical background, setting up intention, looking through their ACE trauma score, their adverse childhood event score, getting to know the person who they are. Like I want to love every client that I work with to the maximum amount, right? With consent and respect and platonic and all that. But to the maximum amount, I want to know their life, their families, their story, and I want to hold that for them. That's the honor of doing this work. And then the integration piece is like, okay, we look at all the beauty that just came out, right? All these things you called into your life, even the horrors. Look at the gifts that they've given you, the blessings like you talked about before. And how do we like begin to integrate all this? What are the lifestyle changes we need to make? And so that's what the 4 weeks after the peak experience are for. I'm firm but fair, because I want people to be able to actually get the juice, all the juice out of the lemon. And so it's like somatic work, mirror work, interrelational work. Many people come to me, if they're in a couple, they're definitely doing stuff together. But if they're solo, they're probably going home and having to do some specific prompts with their partner, or, yab yum exercises where they're somatically like holding each other, because that's where the juice is, right? Like weaving in all of these pieces to make the lifestyle changes. That part of the reason I add psilocybin into the mix with MDMA, as you know, is the neuroplastic window is open longer. So let's make the changes and integrate all of these things that, by the way, I'm not telling them. They're in the medicine telling me what they want. And then the funny part is like, I'm like, okay, we're on week 2 of integration. Why are you doing this thing? And they're like, well, I don't really know. I'm like, your highest self told me this is what you want.
Right.
So let's do it. I'm just telling you what you told yourself you wanted. And so that integration to me is just, it's so important. It's not being done well enough. I'm wildly generalizing. There's plenty of people doing integration well. But typically you go to an ayahuasca journey, there's like maybe one phone call, maybe 5 minutes you get to speak to what happened in your space. There's just not enough integration. And you can go do those things, but my recommendation is always then get an integration coach to help. Or partner up with someone who went to the journey with you if you're working on a budget, and say, hey, can we work to speak to each other a few times over the next few weeks? There's so many options.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to know, it's like these are tools for you to heal yourself. They're not going to heal you. They're going to give you insight. They're going to set the stage, of your brain and its neuroplasticity for you to change yourself.
Yeah.
But they're not going to change you. And in fact, if you go right back into what you were doing and your brain is neuroplastic and you start reinforcing the old ways, then you're reinforcing the old ways.
Yeah, really, really beautiful, really beautiful point. Yeah, and like to that end, I think the biohacker side of me, or I know that the biohacker side of me, the person who wants to organize optimal settings and people feeling good, there's a lot of resistance with MDMA specifically because, like how you mentioned, how you feel after. And so the health optimizer in me is wanting to bring all these tools. And when I started working with clients, I would bring like my magnesium bottle and my like 14 different bottles of pills. And sometimes the clients, supplements can be expensive, sleep pills and whatever. Sometimes I would just take them all home and I would be like, okay, mean for them to, but just not knowing dosage, not understanding what to weave into the journey. Clients not getting a clear picture per se, I would give them supplements throughout to support during, pre and during the medicine journey, but then afterwards they're kind of like on their own, right? And it's like, are you doing electrolytes? Great, but it's not enough for the cognitive, for the emotional, for the mental and all that. And this is where you mentioned, and part of the question you asked before, is like, this is where Vessel comes to play. So this brand that is in a beta stage, it's launching and growing right now, is a brand that I've gotten very passionate about. I work with the 3 co-founders, mostly the 2 co-founders. You got the chance to meet Michael Polano. The other co-founders are Matt Bockensteady, and who's worked in the supplement industry, has had an exit. Michael's background is fitness and health optimization, and then Sean Wells, who's an ingredientologist, and just like the world's greatest supplement guy, like you could ever imagine. He's a super nerd in formulations, and really creating a stack that is the answer to, for at least the MDMA psilocybin world, but the answer to how we can support both the journey as it's happening. So there's cognitive clarity, so there's really tap in, so you can really be within your body, within your brain in a healthy way. So it's almost even like heightening that journey. And then the second half of the stack being the recovery, right? The little bags that we all have been doing, the white bags and the black bags right now. And the recovery stack is like even more important. That's all mood boosting. That's where you blend in your 5-HTP for the first time at that 36-hour mark. And for me, taking those and weaving them into my one-on-one or couples clients or even group ceremony, it was like night and day the difference in people, how they felt. Even like during, people taking it an hour before and being like, I already feel amazing. You know, there's adaptogens, there's all these things in there. And then the recovery is the game, right? Because we want to be able to have a peak experience and have some unpacking of our internal world where we can kind of see the light or experience the highest version of ourselves and what we want. But then we've got to go back to work on Monday or be with the kids or do the thing.
Yeah.
So like, how do we eliminate the deterrent? And the answer, you know, Michael worked for a very long time in health optimization in ceremony spaces, carrying around supplements in a very similar way and trying all different combos on people, and really kind of got to this formula that Sean continues to refine that's like amazing for this exact space. And so I'm just like stoked to have those tools. I weave in music, as many practitioners do. I want all the senses and all the physiology to feel good. So I weave in music. I make, like in my kitchen, I have a little passion project where I make this really beautiful, I call it Love Bomb. And it's like, you know, essential oils and lotion. And so I like gift that to clients, or like rose water. I bring all those things so that people can feel the anchoring of this beautiful work that they get a chance to do. And part of that anchoring is working with Vessel. It's you know, your journey needs a co-pilot. So the supplements give you that.
You know, it's interesting because when I think about it, we were just talking about that you could go back and reinforce your old states, right? If you just jump into something and your brain is neuroplastic. I mean, I just wonder over time if we're going to see a great, greater efficacy of MDMA journeys because of this. Because, you know, you get in this heightened state and, you know, and especially if you were depressive before, right? And you have all these realizations, and all of a sudden you're like back into it. You know, it can re-trigger things into like, I can just tell, like, I'm not going to get into that. You know, like I'm not going to have that depressive thing.
Yeah.
And so I get
Tuesday blues.
Yeah, I get to have my experience and the positive parts of it, and I could reflect on it. But I'm not like right back to where I was avoiding, like what I was trying to get out of, because, you know, of just the nature of that thing. And, you know, I've also noticed, just for me, I think you go through phases with these like, you know, MDMA was really important to me, uncovering sexual abuse, being able to sit with that. And just in a time when I, you know, frankly, just didn't love myself the way that I do now. And I don't feel as much of it. I mean, I feel loving and open. I don't feel as much of a need to like generate that, you know, externally as I did. But that's sort of the journey of medicine work, right? Like there's always something out there for you. And you know, at this point, like the psychedelics with more insight and more like who I really wanted, like the, you know, contemplative side of it. But yeah, I mean, I think for almost everybody, the first move in starting a psychedelic journeys is MDMA, right?
Yeah.
It's
a beautiful doorway, yeah.
Yeah. Sure. And to have this support for it, to really take out, you know, I have access to the best. I mean, I just don't do it because of this thing. And even if I, you know, maybe don't.
Because of like the downside, the aftermath of your body.
Yeah, the aftermath of it, because, you know, it's not necessary for me to feel open and loving. So it's like, okay, I'm going to feel more, you know, it's like, it's definitely a peak experience. Yeah. But like, is that worth it to me to feel like shit 2 days later for an entire day? And the answer has been no for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 times over the past 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And
just so everybody who's listening knows, it's like you and I aren't advocating like go take all the drugs all the time, but like targeted, intentional, therapeutic style journeys can be done once a quarter, like depending on people's trauma. Of course, MAPS would have different protocols, we'd have different protocols, but there's so many beautiful ways to use these medicines.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's important to look at it, you know, assuming you do it and you feel a resonance with it, like honor it as a path, like, and like what is, and tap in your intuition, like what's calling out to me, you know?
What do you say to people, like, because you've come from a background of some addiction or some substance, you know, let's say substance abuse, do you have people that come to you that are like, oh, I see you're sort of on the path of psychedelics and like, I don't know if I agree, or what is this, or like I'm afraid. Like, do you get people to ask you those questions and feel into that in that way with you?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly that, and people with addiction specifically.
Yeah.
And my experience of it is I did MDMA recreationally a lot for a long time. And if MDMA cured trauma, then I would have no trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
But doing
You mean from doing all the recreational stuff?
I mean, I ingested enough product or whatever to clear 10 person's traumas, but doing one guided session with a skilled provider who you met at my party, and she calls what she does witnessing. And she's really, it's not, what's really cool about it is it's like she's tapping into your experience that you're having and just amplifying what is coming out for you, not directing you.
Totally.
And there's a nuance there for sure. And just your part of having skilled practitioners, I worked with her for months, doing Zoom call, like your same thing. She's got an 8-week deal too, and so like working on calls and all this stuff. And I uncovered my sexual abuse the night before our previously scheduled journey. So I showed up and
she was like, here we go.
And I was like, I mean, everything we've talked about is off the table. This is what's happening. I mean, I had a very dark night, the night after learning in hypnosis, and before this thing, I just like couldn't get out of my 6-year-old scared self. And I was in this house alone, and I was in my bedroom, and I literally got up like 50 times to just check if my door was locked. It was like really a little Steve event happening. And what was so cool about being, with someone who's experienced, who's taken trauma certificate, who understands the lay of the land, is I told her this story, and there was no hint of shock or I don't know what I'm doing with this. She was like, this is actually my area of expertise, and I know exactly what to do here. And she completely set me at ease, and we just went in that direction because that was the direction that was up.
Yeah.
And I worry about people who got their psychedelic training out of the back of Rolling Stone or whatever, like dealing with what can happen and what can come up, because sometimes, I'd learned it, the night before, but they come up in these journeys.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you need someone who's able to presence themselves. I mean, that's the mirror neurons and everything.
And
that's
no judgment space and all of that.
Yeah, and you're giving them, you are cultivating your own presence so that you can, offer that to your client, right? When they're dysregulated, the sense of you is very important. And so I really think it's extremely important to have, people who are qualified, and it's really a hurdle for getting psychedelics mass adopted. I mean, if you think about how many qualified therapists we need, and native traditions have been doing this for a long time, and those apprenticeships are like 7 and 20 years, and they're not like...
And the big difference with native too is like those people were in the communities and stayed in those communities. So it's like, they might not have called it like, we're going to have an integration meeting, but like you're in the village, you're in the tribe, they're like, you're going to carry wood today because this is part of your, it's all, everybody's watching each other and witnessing each other in medicine, and knowing where people are holding back and telling stories. And then it just can be worked into the culture of the community, right? Because you're around each other all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's why like integration and change can happen in those environments without, doing this like, North Americanized thing of like, let's create an integration practice. But we have to do that now because we don't necessarily sit in those same ways,
Yeah, and that's, I think that we're losing connection.
Yeah.
We have the biggest companies in the world trying to make us alone in our basements on our phones.
I know.
And so that just the being in I've been in a men's group for 9 years, just sitting around a fire and talking about things, and you learn so much from that experience, and you can count on those people, and you really learn a lot about life by just seeing other people's experience. Now if my brother Dave or Bill is going through a time period which they're, doesn't feel as good for them or as difficult, I know. I was like, well, I mean, this is like just 2 or 3 months before they're going to report here. This is, I met this person there. This is the greatest thing happening. And that's the way life is, and by sharing often, I think you get to gain perspective from other people. And, it's funny because I stumbled into all of this stuff. Like, I mean, what I really realized is...
But men's group for 9 years, it's like, I feel like men's group work is like a little bit just coming to the forefront now. So you were like actually working on doing some of that work and being connected, especially like, don't you feel like as a man in the world, like there's navigating shame, navigating, don't be so emotional, or all these societal pressures and whatnot. Like the men's group had to have felt like, I don't know, an exhale. I don't want to speak for you, but does it feel like such an exhale? Does it feel like such a great thing for the masculine to go and do, be around other men? In my mind, you're like hunting and fishing and saying things around the fire, but probably it's an opportunity for you guys to be open with each other.
Yeah, I mean, yes,
both.
It's been an incredible experience. I mean, I went in there in the midst of a very chaotic divorce where, my ex went missing and suicide attempts, and went to rehab, like all this kind of stuff. And so it was dramatic. And those guys got to support me there. I think really like unpacking the notion of that it's okay to be seen. So one of the things that we would do with our men's group a lot are called dyads. We just break into groups of 2, and we look at left eye to left eye. And the leader would give us like a sentence stem, something like, if you really knew me, you would know. And then he has a timer, and he's letting you. So you're just saying, if you really knew me, Chris, you'd know I'm a good father, or whatever it is. And you're doing that for like a minute and a half, and you get all of your pre-programmed shit out in the first 30 seconds, and then it starts to become real.
Yeah, you get like the surface stuff out of the way.
Yeah, because you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to say. Like, what are you grateful for? I'm grateful for my children.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for my children, but then you start to get into different things, and the process of being seen in a way that felt uncomfortable. And, then you thank the other person for doing it, and you give them a hug, and you hear them. But it just slowly broke open my life, really. And, being vulnerable definitely was my first experience, was that in men's group. And, his name's Ravane Bacall, and he's been on this podcast. He's a very cool guy, still a mentor of mine, was at the party. He has really just he's got this laser insight in people. So I wouldn't say that I became vulnerable by my own choice, honestly, because he just can like look at you and ask you a few questions, and he has this technique of asking you to say something out loud. So he might say, just like, Kristin, why don't you say out loud, like, I undermine all my relationships because I don't feel worthy of love. And if he's hitting on your core wound, like you bawl. And I've never really seen him, because he's so intuitive, go more than 2 or 3 questions. So the first time I was ever, I think, vulnerable in my life in a way, he asked me, like, deep down inside, do you feel like a bad man? And that was something I'd carried my whole life. And I just was like, I just could not, I was just coming out. It was just like these waves of sadness and feeling bad. And that was like when the guys, I was in the first few months of this thing, all the guys were like, I feel you so much more. Like, I just got like the most glowing reviews of my
Once
shares.
you owned it, yeah.
Yeah, just that like, we're really feeling you. And like, and it just sort of became, I really started to figure and learn that this vulnerability is really a power in so many ways. And I would tell you, it's like, I don't feel as vulnerable telling my sexual abuse story anymore. Because, you know,
It's not as hot, right? It's not on the burner, on the flame, because you're like, I've looked at it and I've looked at it and I've looked at it.
Yeah, and by saying it so many times, I'm really have made it a memory. You know, there are different things, you know, things come up and you're working through it. So, but yeah, I just think it's so important to kind of have that experience. And it's just like in life, if we are just wanting to be like, I want to express myself in the way that shows you who I am, and I want to know who you are. And I don't really like, I mean, I care what you do. We're interested in what we do, but I don't care what you do really. Like when I meet somebody, you know, I want to know something about them. And you can, what's cool about it is, I mean, this is only basically the third time we've met each other, but I feel like we became really good friends. We had, you know, the Heartland gathering and interaction there. We had lunch. And then we've stayed in touch on this, and it's like you can form a deep connection with somebody quickly.
For sure, and I think this is I want to say, like, therein lies what I hope is the future of community and connection, which is actually, it requires, I mean, it would require this beautiful sushi meal we had, but when I was here, it requires like you showing up to be like, I'm excited and present and open to sharing all of me with this woman who I showed up excited and present and willing to share all of me, not knowing what we'd ask each other, not knowing each other as well as we do now then, and really being able to sit in conversation. And we like sat, we ate sushi, we talked for 2 hours, we did all the things but because both of us are willing to be like, okay, I'm gonna put my cards on the table and have this conversation with a super open heart, because this is all we're trying to do with the medicine work, with the nervous system regulation, is get out of fear and get back into love. It's like if we show up that way with that intention together, then that was one of the most beautiful lunches I've had in a very long time. And so like imagine, maybe in business situations we have to have a little bit more candor or whatever, right? But imagine if we tried to do that with a bit more intentionality more often, right? Whether it's a meal or a get together or a hangout, like, and just really making eye contact and really speaking our truths. And I think we both cried into our rice bowls or whatever. But like, also that's the other thing, like, and I told you things about thinking about becoming a mother and like all these things that I haven't even told everyone in my life, because you laid the groundwork for that by also sharing yourself fully. And that's like, to me, that's where the magic is. And this is, whether it's going first or going second in that conversation, it's like, it's the bouncing the ball back and forth to like continue to deepen and deepen. You know, it's like when I did the YPO thing here, I think we were talking about this, that they have kind of the thing that you like, most people are talking in the first 70%. It's like, how do you get down to the 30% of depth? Like, not how's the weather? When's your flight home? Those things. How do you get to the deeper 30%? And then how do you really get to the 5%? Where you're like, I'm really worried about, like a gentleman had said to me at some point, I'm really worried about my daughter. She has an eating disorder and I'm trying to navigate that. Like, that's the real meat and potatoes, right? You get to share with each other, so.
Yeah, and I think there's, you know, one thing that's important to point out now, I think when, you know, when someone's being vulnerable to you, if you can look at them through this frame of the hero's journey, like we're all going through it, everybody, there is no person that did not go through things that made them smaller in life and that they have to go over with. And they're choosing to have some courage and to tell you something. It's a real honor. Like, you should look at it like, you know, I don't know if people look at it like I'm being burdened or whatever with somebody's things, but I would not be framing. I mean, this is like somebody is trusting you. Somebody's assuming that you can hold this stuff, that you're mature enough and loving enough and, you know, do that.
Yeah.
Because it's also, especially for people, you know, like I said, now I just use it as a barometer. If someone's an asshole to me about it, I'm like, well, the person's an asshole. Like, I don't need to deal with every person, you know?
Yeah, or
like
perhaps someone just gets really shy because it feels like a touchy subject for them or scary or something. And then you're like, oh, I shouldn't go there with that person. They're probably not going to be my best friend either.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's certainly there's range and there's also ranges. I mean, people are very different. So, you know, anybody who has known me my whole life and, hasn't interacted with me in the past 3 years might think like this is ridiculous that I'm doing this podcast, because they've experienced me in a different way. But I also know that this can change and your nervous system can regulate and you can open yourself up to a life. And, the life that I had before doing this work, like on the outside looked like, an enviable life. I mean, I made, millions of dollars in my 20s, and I had a beautiful, kind of star DJ wife, and I had awesome kids, and I lived in Maui and Tahoe and all these things. And really, those experiences they're not empty. I wouldn't say that, but they're just the quality of them and how I feel is so much different. And I don't really need a peak experience to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I felt like before I was just pinging between, like I was just waiting for the next peak experience, whether it was drugs or sex or this or that.
Right.
It was like,
to kind of mask mask the internal feelings that you're having.
I just had to go through the shit of life to get to the next one.
Yeah.
It's an amazing experience. I've never met anybody who engaged in it that didn't think it was very valuable for their life. And sometimes you can just kind of, luck into things. I mean, that psychedelic experience I told you about with the Chili Peppers, I didn't know anything about it. It was before I met Leah. And I mean, I knew about psychedelics. I'd kind of started to hear there was some research about them, but I wasn't immersed in the world. And I got COVID. And that was the time we were quarantining. So I spent 2 weeks in bed just writing and really driving in like everything that I had heard and that thing. And I'm sure getting COVID at that time was like one of the biggest blessings of my life, because it
required you to slow down.
I accidentally integrated. I mean, it was a very powerful experience.
Yeah.
But I was planning on, that was a Saturday, I was planning on working on Monday.
Yeah.
And it, COVID, the quarantine thing, it gave me the permission to just sort of not, to do it and milk it. But I just laid in bed and I just wrote and I just reflected on the experience and what it really meant to me. And that really drove it home. And then I just realized and then my behaviors changed. Like instantly, I haven't drank since then. That's been 3.5 years. I lost like 40 pounds. I started yoga. I mean, it was like my whole life was changing, and behavior change was not difficult.
Yeah.
It was just that this is what I want to do now. And so I started to I was seeking out more sober things to do. I found circling and authentic relating. And so I met a bunch of people in spaces that were, there's no drugs or alcohol. And it was more like about connecting. And I learned those techniques. And there are ways to train yourself to become vulnerable and to become a good listener and to understand that. And so it's just like the best experience that I've ever had in my life, for sure. And that's why I sort of said, because I don't have like a back, I haven't been in fitness my whole life. I haven't, I just sort of had the experience of weaving through a world that I was not really sure of what was going on, not really sure that I could heal, that anything could ever change, not really sure that I deserved it, or I operated as if I was damaged from coming out of the womb. The womb. And the reason why I actually started the podcast this year is, even through all that time, there's 3 years of experience of doing a lot of work and healing, I still felt like I had an addict's body. I still needed things to put in to avoid my current state. And sometime during the neurofeedback that we talked about this year, it just kind of shut off. And that was, that was a moment. I quit my company within 2 weeks of that. And it was a moment that it was like, oh my God, there are millions of people that think they were born wrong. And they weren't. there's a
Nothing
system.
is broken.
Yeah. There's
Well,
a
our system might be broken, but nothing about us is broken.
Yeah, it just adapts, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so it adapted and it protected you at the time. Also, you can change it. And we're talking about a lot of the things that we're talking about help you to change your brain and your nervous system so you can live the life that you maybe thought you didn't deserve.
Yeah. So beautifully put. So beautifully put. One thing I like to ask as we start to get to wrapping up, I think, with each other, is I like to always ask, like, if you could go back and have a conversation with your younger self, you know, your teenage self, with all the things you've learned and everything that you've been through. Like, is there a piece of advice that you would, you know, try to distill to simplicity to give yourself to just lean into a different life or lean more into the person that you are right now?
The first thing that arises when you say that is there's nothing actually wrong here in this moment. And if you look at your life like this hero's journey, like you are here to overcome the things that happened to all of us in childhood. I mean, it's the setup for every human being, right? You're here for that. Kind of be boring if you figured it all out at 15. You know, like you're going through it, and, you know, like orient yourself around being courageous and being loving. And know that you're not going to have it worked out right now, and you don't need to. And even as you get further along there's always more levels. Even when you feel pretty, like I feel like in a very good state, but I also know that I could improve dramatically.
Yeah, there's always more for us.
Yeah.
There are always more.
So what would your answer to that question be?
It's so funny, I asked that question to so many people. And I think if I'm going back and giving myself advice, like the younger version of me, I loved so much about how she played and creative, and I dressed kind of all kooky. I was like a little bit of a nerd, but like I dressed kind of kooky, and I was I had a big imagination. And I think the advice would be to like hold on to more of that, right? Keeping more of a wonder in my life.
Yeah.
And like continuing to look at the world with massive curiosity. And I would probably whisper in her ear as well about, there are going to be so many times that you're hard on yourself, like really, really hard on yourself, and judging yourself and your physical appearance. Yeah. And maybe just only judging yourself by your physical appearance. And that would, to create the understanding in her that's not all there is. That there's like this whole beautiful little girl inside, and this woman that's going to grow up to be this like incredible woman who does so many things, and that the only thing that I'm really holding back when I talk to myself negatively, or when I'm so hard on myself, is like the opportunity for more magic, you know? Yeah. And I would try to drive that point home, because there are so many times in my life that I cut myself down and then spent the busyness of doing that, missing beautiful things that would continue and do continue to unfold when you're not holding that rumination so tightly.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, and thank you for that. And the other thing that just occurred it occurred in my mind, but when you were saying it, is just thanking that younger version and being like, I love the way that you dress so kooky. Like, it's really cool. It's like a really cool thing. Or, you know, or for me, like, yeah, like you adapted to something really difficult. Like, yes, I mean, it was alcohol and crack addiction. Like, that's not like, but those are a way to avoid some things, and you move through it. And so you're just working with what you got, and it's always a journey, and it's always moving forward, and there's so much hope. But it's like, I really think that thing of like burying ourselves in like what we should be and how we should look. And, you know, I can't say that I can fully empathize with the woman, you know, and the body image thing. I mean, that's not something that I've experienced. But, I mean, I can feel it, certainly when you say it. And, you know, I've dated and married multiple people with eating disorder, you know, and all these kinds of things. I know it's extremely prevalent. And yeah, I mean, the answer is on the inside, you know? Yeah. I mean, be beautiful and hot too. I mean, you know, have it all
the things. And also I think that like beauty's an eye of the beholder is really true, but also like the way you walk in the world, like you can, I can put on a sweater and go out and walk one way and have a posture and a thought process of like, this is the frequency thing. This is the energetics of being a human. Our thoughts are becoming things every moment. And the way that we elicit our own prowess from the way we walk out the door can be a beautiful thing. So I can put on a sweater, an outfit, or whatever I put on in the morning, and I can walk out the door with a low posture and a mindset of, self-destruction and all of that. And I'm going to walk down the road differently than if I walk out the door and I've found deeper ways to love myself. And I know that I can be confident in my ability, that for me, like a big thing is that I'm walking down the street as a human who has value without having to give everybody I see something, whether that be like a lesson, a note, a candle, or there's just like the over-giving piece of me that's like, if I keep giving and giving and giving, then I will have value. And trying to really make new decisions around, hey, I want to do this because I love this person and I think it's going to bring us both joy, but it's not that I'm trying to earn that love, from a performative place. And so getting really discerning around that, it's just like, it's a note to the listeners, like that we're all, and I think you and I would both agree on this, that it's like, we think we're alone until we start talking about it. And then we're talking about it, and then we find more tools, whether it be like cold or breath or psychedelics or somatic work or neurofeedback, or like, this is the process of us as humaning together to kind of walk each other home. Yeah. Right. And I think that there's a lot of years with different styles of trauma in my body than yours, of course, but a lot of years that I was like, I'm fine. Yeah. Like what else am I going to do with it? I'm not going to tell everybody that I'm like overthinking and doing this thing or whatever. And so it's like I think it's a beautiful space for us to all get to as efficiently as we can, to say, okay, I'm not alone. Right? You might feel lonely, but we're not alone. And there's so many people, when you share your story, you have said, people have come to you and said, thank you for saying this, because now I can like face this thing, or maybe get a little bit more, open with my family that there was some sexual abuse in my life. Yeah. And that's like so important for the rest of the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very powerful process. And I think, what came up when you were talking about the body image stuff, and some of the other things you were just saying is really, I think there's just this notion in that like, I'm not really enough. Right. And I think we should be healthy, and we should look and feel as good as we possibly can. I mean, that's just honoring our body and this beautiful vessel that we have. But like, that's not like, it's not a cover up for feeling like I don't have, like, you have worth as a person. Like, shining your light is what you're meant to do. When you do that, people see it. Yeah. I mean, we've all had this experience of meeting somebody and they just have this sort of energy and this presence, and it affects you. Yeah. And really, I just believe, because we're all yearning to do that, when somebody puts their light out there, it's like a homing beacon for the people that are too scared to turn theirs on. Yeah. And you can mask it in so many ways, like, I'm successful, I'm super ripped, I'm, this or that, but it's like, and all of those things are good. I think being successful and being super ripped is awesome. They're great,
but also like, turn on your lantern, be a lighthouse, so other people can be like, oh, I have one too, I didn't even notice. Okay, I'm going to turn mine on and see how that goes.
Yeah, and those things are coming from a place of being loving, right? Yeah. So like, yeah, like, I'm ripped, now, I mean, that might take on a different thing that is really like, man, what a blessing I have to have this life and to be able to shine my light on people. Like, I want to be able to do it from a vessel that is strong. Yeah, absolutely. From a vessel that has good energy, that I take care of, that I respect the incredible, like, chance that it is that I, like, am a human being on this planet. Yeah. So beautiful. I know we need to kind of wrap our time. I want to just tell you and everyone who's listening how much I love you and how stoked I am about the Neuro's Journey podcast and everything that's happening with it, and just really, getting to see more and more of your expansion and doing more fun things together. Awesome. I love you too. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for joining us here on Well Power. You can submit questions, learn more, shop incredible brands, and connect with me at wellpower.life. Or follow me on social at biohacking.breath.cold. From comfort to courage, friends, we're doing it. Any foul language you hear is not approved by my mother.